Aloha Friday, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, 5 o'clock Eastern sharp. And tonight we have Tony with me all the way from the NYC. We're going to be talking about leadership and communication, something that undoubtedly you have faced in your lifetime. Communication, how to do it effectively, how to do it timely, how to do it right. How about that? So, first of all, Tony, thank you for being with me tonight. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes there to introduce yourself, tell us what your background is, and then we'll get into the conversation and get people educated tonight.
Absolutely. Tony, for those of you who haven't met me, I help parents create a successful online coaching business using 1 hour a day. And I help with the communication because it's very effective to do that. So a couple of my experience, I've been a parent for about 13 years now. So that's all. So I've been about 30, looking forward to the teen years. And I'm about my EQ certification practitioner, as well as I've been in the coaching and consulting business for approximately 12 years plus. So that's a little bit about me.
Outstanding. So, as a parent, you have to have communication down, or there's going to be some stuff go sideways, right? So, it's not only pushing out to the children what we would like for them to participate in, but more importantly, that they understand the two-way thing, right? And what it requires for communication to be effective. Now we have tonight. Thank you for all those chiming in. It's about 6 people already. Thank you, Ricky, sunny Southern California. She's got it down. I usually say, hey, let me know where you where you chiming in from, where you connecting from. She's been with us long enough to throw that in there. But thank you, Ricky, for being with us tonight. Anybody else? Hey, just throw your comments in the comments section. Hey, UK. Thank you for being with me, brother. I
All right,
appreciate that.
UK.
And we'll have other people chime in there, but and I'm gonna say Sixto, Chi-town, baby, all the way up in the north where it gets cold. I'm in Florida, so I feel for you, brother. Cello, he has sent this earlier on, and so he wished us a fantastic show. Thank you for that, brother. And everybody else, hey, just let us know where you're coming in from, Pacific Northwest. Brian, thank you, brother, for being with us tonight. So we're going to be talking about leadership and communication. I remember taking a communication course, and it was built with a lot of theory and a lot of great information. So you get educated on that front. Then comes the practice. How do you put this into play? And they never, ever stress that you can have all the tools in the world, you can have all the education in the world, and you can have all of the best intentions. There's still a second piece to that could be on a good day or a bad day. And depending on the receiver, that communication can go different kind of ways, right? So, first of all, tell us a little bit about what you uh, would define communication as, and what it looks like when it's good. Because we're going to talk about when it's bad.
Right. I think when you have good communication, whether it's with a parent, with a spouse, is reciprocated, acknowledging it. It's a great communication where it's effectively delivered. The other person is saying, "Oh yeah, I get what you're saying. Not only do I get what you're saying, I'm feeling what you're saying." Because nothing worse than having a person sitting there is like, "I get what you're saying," because I think we've all been there. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Darn well they're not listening to you. So communication, I definitely feel, is when it's reciprocated, delivered, it's very transparent. What you're saying, what you're doing, and it's very clear.
Yeah, and we have just a couple of couple of lag on your end, Tony, but just to summarize this, there's a person where the message is going out, and then there's a person where the message is coming in. Either of those two, sender receiver modes can be perfect at the same time. One could be perfect, the other one not, or both of them could be lacking, right? And so, you always get the proverbial nod of "I'm listening," right? I'm digesting this thing. I'm hearing what you're saying. You can never truly know whether the message is getting across. you you just know that there's sound going out and sound is being received. Where
That's
where you what
right.
I heard you say was um, not only the head nodding, the basically the affirmation that, hey, I just heard such and such. Is that what you're telling me? Right? Now you're looking at, you're saying, hey, I got the message. Now let me make sure that it was the intended message, right? Because uh, there could be a misinterpretation of the message, and I've seen that happen. Right? Have you ever seen a
Oh,
line full of people? You say, "Hey, you're gonna say something in their ear, and then we're gonna see how this look 100 people down the road, right? Or 20 people down the
oh
road,
yeah.
however you want to match it. But we're gonna see if this message can consistently mean the same, and at the end, if we get the exact same message. I'm not gonna throw a stat out there, but let me just see. I have not. Let me just say I have not seen one yet where the message given at the beginning of the line is exactly the same message repeated at the end of the line. So you have all these different components, Tony, and it's and all these variables to either enhance or detract from the effectiveness of communication. So give me a couple of instances where you have come across where you've gotten both. You've gotten a great communication, and you've gotten some struggles that nobody wants.
Well, I'll go back to there was a time for effective communication we'll talk about in business. So I used to work for a company called Altel when I was still in business. Some of you maybe know what Altel was before it got absorbed. However, when I was working there, we were in a very remote location. Now, this remote location were just getting started, so people did not understand the cell phones because they were used to lines. So I came to one of the customers, you cannot plug the cell phone into the wall and go 500 feet or from their cell phone tower, which is poor communication of what they were understanding. Photos delivering a landline into the ground, other line, wireless, wireless, and they were having such a hard time. What is this? What is this concept of cell phone? Interesting that way. At the end, I actually got the point across. I'm like, oh, this is really neat, and they love the concept because it was an area and people were used to having box phones and mountain phones, and of course the landlines. So that type of communication worked pretty well. I think some of the greatest conversations, especially with entrepreneurs or even other parents as well, is when things are reciprocated, and then I can have a joyful flow of conversation, and obviously that we're on the same vibes. It's not going to talk to something about Marvel, but they're a DC person, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, we hate Marvel. I'm not going to listen to you at all." And I like those conversations when they feel equilibrium of the subject matter you're talking about.
Well, hey, I feel you because sometimes me and my sons we'll play a game, and it has to usually do with guess who, right? And we're always talking about so what's the theme? I say okay, I got Marvel, you got this other, you got DC, and then you got I don't know something like Minecraft, right? Something like that. And so that's the arenas that you own. So you're going to describe this person, and then we're going to blurt out who we think it is, right? And sometimes I'll get DC and Marvel mixed. So I'm talking about and my sons will be like, Dad, you you're sending mixed messages. Now I don't even know what that person is because you're putting part of this one and then part of that one, and you're making your own person, and we just can't guess, right? And so sometimes in
Oh yeah.
communication, we have what we think we want to say, and then there's what we're saying, and then there's what people are hearing us say, and it could be all three different things. Um,
Oh yeah.
hey, check this out. So Byron, he comes on. He says a personal story between me and Enrique when we was in the Navy on the ship during the weather. Communication was very key in what we did. When I went out to do weather observation and conditions changed, that was not either forecasted or was ahead of the forecast period. I had to communicate to that to Enrique, and either the forecast would need to be amended or we would have to let our higher ups know that conditions have changed, right? So there, there was a lot of those. Thank you, Byron, for that. A lot of those moments
That's
where
awesome.
where you had this communication that was already put out, right? As a forecaster, and that's what I'm a meteorologist, oceanographer. As a forecaster, I put this forecast out. He was the observer, so he had to make sure that the conditions didn't change. Well, imagine that on a ship that actually moves. So,
Right.
so you could have been calling for sunny, clear skies, 7 miles visibility or more, unrestricted, right? And you went ahead and moved into a fog bank, ceilings at 100 feet and 12-foot waves. It just that's how it goes. So communication was key in those instances. Um, but talking about the difference, the difference in what you're intending to say and what you're really saying and what's being understood. Tell us a little bit about how that dynamic, uh, how we can improve that dynamic.
I think to improve that dynamic the most, in my experience, is being clear of what you're saying. And if you feel like you're clear, even if you think you're clear, then reinforcing by asking a question. Do you like what I'm saying? I know on this coast or the East Coast, that's what a lot of people just like. You understand,
Right.
which it took me a little bit of getting used to when I first came over, or at least does it make sense? Like, are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it helps to clarify that they're actually getting you, or they will tell you, no, I think you said it this way. Especially maybe get in an argument with your wife or ex or anything like that. You guys know what I'm talking about. One of your spouses, and you get that conversation of, hey, I think you really said this, but that's not what I'm trying to say. But I think you said this. And he'll
Right.
double back on you. So
Right.
it's good to be clear and then ask questions to resolve it. So it'd be easier to, get the point across. So you can just at least clarify it.
Well, Sarah had said she's coming from the UK. She says reflecting and asking questions, the power of that instead of assuming, right? So there's always you can always assume all day long. That's something you could do all day long. I've seen people do it all day long. Um, but in communication, especially when it's coming from a perspective of I'm saying this because I require this by this time, right? Let's talk about the work setting, right? It's usually the communications there are directive in nature. They're, a leader or a boss at the time is looking for some outcome. So they're communicating their desired end result, right? They never going to take you step by step. You got to take that and say, okay, this is what is needed at by this time. This is what we need to produce, or this is what we need to have. And so now, if I, as a leader, am not ensuring that my message intention, that the intent behind my message is understood, I may get something else at, let's say, 5 o'clock that I really didn't ask for, because you're allowing people to make some assumptions. Now, obviously, if your team is that good that they know you that well, that you can ask for a certain thing and they will produce exactly what you're asking for, then hey, bravo. Uh, but that's kind of like a unicorn, right? It's
Right.
hard. It's hard to get. It's hard to get. So in times of leadership's opportunity to explain, um, you mentioned not leaving anything for ambiguity. Don't let people assume things and kind of try to fill in the blanks. How would a leader execute that type of communication with their team where they get exactly what they're intending to get?
Well, I would say that they would be clear, concise, and to the point, and then double back to reinforce what they're wanting to do for expectations. Just as a leader myself, there's been many times where I've given specific directives or saying, "Hey, can you do this?" And they come back, it's like, "I thought you meant this." It's like, "No, I didn't mean this." So now our time's a little bit short. There's a time I was running an event production company, and one of my friends who had actually hired, they had set up the room completely wrong, upside down. Like, they're like, "Oh, I thought this would be a good idea of doing that." I said, "But that's not what our client is paying us for. The client is paying for us to do this. So now you need to go back and fix all this." Like, oh my gosh, freaking out. But I was very clear of, "Hey, I need you to do A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to go take a lunch breaks because we have it all day, and I need to get some food. Can you get this handled?" Was like, "Yeah," and I come back and it's completely the opposite way because the person had that idea for what it is. And there's nothing wrong with people having ideas and implementing them, but you want to confirm, because if that is not to a client's expectation because you're paying for a service, that could be have some great and horrible repercussions, as we know. So
Yeah. So how do I say it? That I have found it best to get the deadline be advised by the team. So basically, what she's saying that once the people involved, the ownership falls on them. Um, I would I would love that the sense of ownership fall on them, right? The leader's always going to own it. They're always going to own it. But I love what she says there, because it's a different conversation if I, as a leader, come and say, "Hey, Tony, we got to produce this, right? What do you think a good timeline is to produce that by today?" And you say, "Well, hold on, let me go to the team and find out what that really entails, and I'll get right back to you on what we feel the timeline would be for that." That's a great
right,
position to put the team in, and you are also inviting them into the process versus just mandating a process and expecting a result on a timeline that may be unrealistic. Now, I don't know about you, Tony, but
correct.
I have been on the receiving end of a directive where the timeline was unrealistic, and I, me being me, I didn't mind telling them that's unrealistic. Now we're gonna have to talk about that one because it just can't happen. Without some type of concession. You're gonna take from Peter to get to Paul on this one. But it can't be to the point where this thing may fail because then we all lose, right? So when you have,
Oh
how
yeah.
do you feel about that comment about in treating the team on the deadline versus giving them a deadline?
Oh yeah, I like that idea a lot better. Also, too, I mean, it really depends on the client too, and what their perceptions are. If you think about it, when it comes down to it as well, because we all have the parts of business owners as leaders where there is that set expectation compared to what actually takes place with the work. Today's society with communication, it's learning knowledge isn't actual practical knowledge because we have YouTube at the tip of our fingertips. But just because we saw it done doesn't mean we can go out there and apply it. I think that's kind of a lack in communication just overall in our society today. But I definitely do like the aspect of bringing in the team to allow them to do it if the circumstances allow it. Absolutely, 100% for that because it's better
Yes.
to join forces to move it bolder as opposed to put
Yeah, and she also makes a point of the fact that making sure that communication is going to the right people, because you could be communicating to the wrong group. Hey, I need I don't know, I need uh, uh, 20 slabs of ribs, and you're like talking to mechanics, and they're like, fine. what
what?
what are we supposed to do about that? And it happens, right? It happens. Some leaders do go around barking orders or communicating to the wrong people sometimes, and you're never going to get what you expected if you're doing that. So thank you, Sarah, for that commentary and those tips there. So we're I want to take a little minute and talk about like a break here and talk about uh, this right here. This so I mentioned the Honolulu Cookie Company, right? I'm going to be tagging them after this for this, but I have been purchasing these cookies from them as a way of showing appreciation, but also for the consistency of somebody listening to the points that we make throughout the show. And at the end, I always ask somebody 4 points that you may have made, Tony, and they may have taken out of the conversation, and the person they gets the 4 points right. Although we talking a lot about stuff, right? We're talking about a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
um I usually, and I'm just gonna give y'all a hint, I usually just summarize them at the end. So it's not rocket science, right? But those cookies, brother, are just out of this world. So today I was fortunate enough to meet with somebody that got a pack of this from the live. I hope they're enjoying it right now, because if I was them, I would have ate all of them by now. But thank you, Honolulu Cookie Company, for what you do out there on the island and for providing such great cookies. Thank you for that. Now, back to leadership and communication. So here we go. What are the most what is the things that you see most happen in communication that we should be working on?
I think there's a lack of going back to what we were talking about before. There's a lot of assumptions that happens with communication, or my personal favorite of communication physically. So what I'm talking about, depending on your culture or anything like that, is this type of part
Mm.
over over there, right?
Puerto Rico written all over it.
So- or the toe
Oh,
pointing, depending over there, get it over there. It's
we
my foot, but it's like Get it over there.
Yeah, yeah, we do a lot of over there. Yeah, we do it all the time. That's not blowing kisses. It's not. It's pointing. I don't know why we use our snout versus our finger. Have no idea, but that's what we do in Puerto Rico, and and I'm sure that any people from the island they understand. So cultural things, right?
So,
It's funny because you would think that communication is just the verbal, speaking. We do know that we have body language, right? That whole nodding is supposed to be I'm listening. It could
exactly.
be could be something else. Who knows? But there are cultural things, right? Uh, in Puerto Rico, we use a lot of hands. We always the hands are going. We're pointing, we're doing this, and maybe that's why we use our smile, our lips, because our hands are too busy to point as we're talk
That's
as we're
crazy.
talk as we're talking. But yes, you bring up a good point. So I call that awareness of who you talking to and when you're talking, to ensure that you're not maybe violating some things. While I was in the military, uh, we always got briefs on this next country that we're going to, this next country we're going to. This is what's acceptable or not in your dialogue or interaction with them. They made sure that that was iron. The brief, you all understand. We do not want an international incident because you crossed your leg and your foot was on top and then you're pointing it at somebody, right? These are all ways to communicate with your body. You just didn't know. And it's true, right? So in cultural,
Oh
and we're
yeah.
talking about communication in general, but in cultural settings, what should I be doing to make sure that I don't, mess up?
I would say culture before going into it. Again, definitely having briefed for what that is. I mean, coming over here, that's why I think in New York City, getting the whole scope, there's a lot of different cultures over here. There's a lot of different
Right.
expectations. New York City's tend to be the pinnacle, as well as Dubai and other countries. Those are like the two top ones. And then Canada, you've got Vancouver. Those are like the top spots. But going back to that is just studying and knowing and being observing. That's what makes our culture and communication great, because there's so much of it. I mean, you go to the Philippines right now, and I'm not sure they probably added on a bunch of different more dialects, but there was the last I studied and read was 72 dialects in that country. 72 dialects. That's a lot. So you go to
Wow.
one part, you walk in one different area. It's different from another area or part as well. So I would definitely study or be aware, at least cognizant of it. And just going back to what you said before, awareness. Be aware of what's going on, or be aware of your surroundings. Number one rule I teach my kids: watch your surroundings. Know what's going on.
Right. Yeah. And so, as we develop as leaders, uh, now not everybody gets exposed to a foreign company. Not everybody deals internationally. Most people deal domestically, right? That I may talk to, but I have an international Rolodex, right? There's people that I know around this world, and there are things that as leaders we may not get exposed to in our current role wherever we may be. It does not mean that you will never. So if I have any advice to leaders tonight is that you start getting smart about the companies and the countries that Americans are dealing with, because it may come a point where you will have to communicate outside of the realms of just regional or state and national. You may go international with a business or a venture, and that could truly cost you some money if you start communicating in the wrong way, right? So that's a great point, and to bring in cultural communication, because it does exist. Now, body language, it's one that, and Sarah said there's, you know, that it's a big one. One gesture can mean something in one part of the world, and it may mean a whole other thing in another part of the world. So to make
Yeah.
communication complex, we had to throw the body in it. That's how I feel. So, have you seen, body language go wrong?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done it too. Just being honest, because my stance, especially sometimes I'll listen, which a lot of people think would be a defensive stand. My arms are kind of just listening, but to a lot of other people, it would be like, oh, he's not listening to me. That's the defensive part. But to me, I'm relaxed. Like, yeah, I'm listening to you. Right, that type of. Then we're kind of just gauging the room, but that verbal to nonverbal aspect of it definitely comes back into play when your vocal language, or my personal favorite, depending on who's speaking, or if there's depending on your background. Let's say, for example, you came from a background of a family that was yelling. That was their way of communicating. And then you had another
Mm.
family that came that they were very quiet. So their way of communicating is very soft spoken, while the other's all very loud spoken. So then you have two butting heads of basically just singing. I'm hearing music in the
Yeah, that's
background.
my background
But
music, brother. That's me just jamming. That's
that's
me
cool.
jamming over here.
But you'll have the different communication barrier for the yelling to soft spoken, and what it comes down to of this is the way I communicate, but this is the way I communicate. And you have to find that medium of how you can do that in balance without either, I wouldn't say necessarily offending the other person, but at least communicating that some rationalized degree, because we got a person always yelling all the time because that's the way they talk and that's the way they is. Perfectly good example. That's why I get used to a little bit in Colorado. I'm a little bit more soft spoken as well. And
Right.
over in New York City, it's very loud, and a lot of people speak very loud because it's very loud. It's very noisy, and I can be standing literally right next to them, and they're still at their high level of tonality, which is another part coming into is watching your tone of how you're doing and saying and addressing. The tone is really coming into a play of how you're doing, because as leaders, it's not exactly what you say, but it's how you say it and how it's delivered out. So
Yeah, the delivery is definitely one of those things that you have to be cognizant of, eh, because that's one thing you control, right? Um, you don't want to aim to throw a fastball and throw a curve, or aim to throw a curve and throw a fastball. They might hit it out the out of the park, right? Um, so what I'm saying is you may lose in those instances. So you have to ensure that your delivery method is solid, and then also ensure that once it landed, that it was understood the way you intended. Now, Sarah said that in Iran, you do not want to do a thumbs up in Iran, and talk about a proverbial way of expressing yourself as an American, right? We use, hey, everything's okay. There goes the thumb, right? Or you could do the okay, which is another,
right.
which which is another
That's
a thing you
another,
might
yeah.
not want to do, right? And so
Give the
you,
okay sign.
yeah, oh, you want to do that to me? You know what I'm saying? In some parts of the world, it could get pretty hairy real quick. Um, And like for instance, in Japan, right? In Japan, those trains can get pretty uncomfortable real quick, especially if you're trying to jump on that thing in rush hour. You're gonna be
I
close
want to be a
and
professional
personal,
pusher.
bro. Look, I'm one that like the space, right? Because I like to give some space, but I do like my space. There was no space. You had all kinds of stuff butting up against you that you did not intend to before you jumped on that train. And so yeah, and over there, hey, it's understood. You're about to be sardines all the way to your next stop. In America, there's something we do not. Hey, we don't get all up like that. Not like that. And
Right.
right, and so it's funny. It's just some things that are acceptable in some places, and there's some things that are not. And as a communicator, the person that holds, right? Because we could go out in the world and say nothing all day long, right? You're not pushing anything out, um, except that you still may be doing it, physically, like you with your body. And we just talked about that. But when you
Right.
have the opportunity to send a message out, you have to be smart enough to say, is it time? Number one, is it the right time to
True.
communicate this? Number two, are these people ready to receive that? And if those, it's like a check, go through a checkbook. So tell us some things that you may suggest that I should be checking off as I'm going through this whole process of communicating.
I actually like the comments you said. I like the part of the delivery method. Use ask a question. Obviously, ask a question. Make sure your audience is going to recognize and understand. Use a hook. Use your delivery. Make sure, obviously, it's to the right audience. And as a leader, too, you will actually probably attract that over a given time and space, depending on how much you're beating on your craft. But there's that, as well as be you, be real, raw, and authentic, and deliver that message out for where you're doing. Because there's sometimes too, if you're looking on playing on the opposite side here, or what you would say you're the devil's advocate, is that there's also times you can deliver a message that other person may not want to receive it anyway. So you could also be playing on the tail back end of that, trying to deliver something that they may not want from the get. But you don't want them to get that message. Maybe it wasn't for them. So
Yeah, that's and everybody has their own checklist. But most people don't go through a checklist before they say stuff, right? Um, let's talk a little bit about the one thing that could derail you, whether you had all your checklists or not, which is emotions. When emotions are involved, chances are your message may get skewed, right? Yeah,
truth to
it
that.
it might be, right? It might. I don't know. Maybe you're talking to a group that is used to that. But when you start throwing emotions into your communications, which is perfectly okay if you know how to repackage what you was about to say, right? Because sometimes there are instances where you know, it's during a time of anger, right? Now you either have to be smart enough to say, I would I do have something to say about that, but at this moment, I'm going to refrain from saying anything about that. Give me a day, give me whatever, give me some time to come back to this conversation. Is that okay? Because if I, in my head, I was like, because if I let loose right now, it might it might not be all that good, right? So, so what's your feelings on emotion?
See the Hulk and
emotion.
Enrique.
Hey, look, it's just one of those things that we deal with as humans, man. Right? Emotions. This is, and a lot of times as leaders, and I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you'll talk about it here in a second. Some leaders get derailed by they have the right message. It's just that at the wrong time and under dire stress. So, what can you tell us about the component of emotion when you talk about communicating?
For communicating, there was a book, and this is actually part of why I started my business. What it got me actually to this point is I read a book by Wayne Dwyer, and in this book it says, "Be open to everything but attached to nothing." And during that time, I had thought the experience was about learning everything, get everything under your belt, experience the world. It was my 20s, right? What else would you think? But as
Right.
I got older and I realized I was doing more leadership roles, doing mentoring, is that when you have your emotions in part, or you're feeling all those, you don't have to be necessarily attached to the emotion. You have to be present, know that it's aware of, but you can be detached from that. And that's what I got from it as I obviously have gotten older between that time, is that you can feel those emotions, and but don't let it affect your communication. You're still going to be delivering your message at a specific given time, but it's also being aware of where your emotional state is. Or also what they talk about is having your emotional level of intelligence, because there is such a thing. If you not heard it, you have IQ and then you have EQ.
Hmm. Yeah, and Zara just said about that EQ. So when people are in leadership positions and they, I've had some say, no, I don't deal with that EQ stuff. The very first thing I ask them is, are you prepared for the results of not dealing with that EQ stuff? They're like, what do you mean? Am I prepared?
One
I
hundred
said, well,
percent.
well, you say that you're not dealing with that. In not dealing with that, you will deal with it. It's gonna come. So there's a EQ, and then there's the lack of EQ. Are you ready for what comes from lack of EQ? Because it's there, and it's a subject that is talked about because it's there, right? So we have this awareness requirement on the leadership side that whether you like it or not, you will have to get smart on. The reason is we deal with people. It's people's lives we deal with. It's people's lives that are at stake on the other side of your leadership. It's not you. Because guess what? You get fired. Guess who? Another leader is going to come in there. Same group of people. So it's the people that are the recipients of you either being on this side of EQ or not. Right? So it's going to happen. So if you don't have a way to address your way of being and the lack of a certain subject in your life, then basically your lack of planning and like was just written here will be basically a plan to fail. And so
That's
that's
right.
why I asked that question, right? That's why the question is posed.
Benjamin Franklin.
There you go, right? So tonight we've covered a lot of things, right? A lot of things. Um, we're talking about clarity of message. We've talked about the timing of message, of that communication. We've talked about the audience, right? You got to be talking to the right people. It's just like in business, right? I'm in leadership development. If I'm not talking to people that want leadership development, I just wasted my time. Um, and then we talked about awareness, emotion, EQ, all that. You have to be aware as a leader. to make sure that your communication is effective. So, what kind of tip could you give us tonight that you say, Enrique, if people did this, they'd be a whole lot better off in terms of communication, right?
In terms of communication, I feel is if people communicated more and spoke what they really felt, the world would be a whole lot better off. Be
Mm,
real. Don't sedate. Don't lie. Lie to yourself and
mm.
just deliver your message. And the right people are going to be brought to you. That would be my part for the world.
So being real, being true. That's be and that's how I say. Tell me the truth. We could work with that. But if you tell me something masked as somebody of something else, we may never get to the bottom of this. So be honest in your communication, but in your honesty, and this is I always advise people, in your honesty, ensure that love is applied because that allows you to basically put yourself in that other person's shoes that's receiving this message, right? So you could be honest, and it is what we want, but at the same time, remember that fact is not necessarily truth. And this is what people say, "Oh, I'm just telling the truth." No, you're telling a fact. When you tell the truth, it gives me a bridge back to safety. I messed up. All right, I messed up. You're telling me the fact. How do I get out of this? That's what truth is, right? So in your communications, be honest, but be truthful and apply some love. I love it. Um, Tony, it's been such a good time to chat with you, let you share some steps on communication and what you feel that area should require from us. How can someone get a hold of you if they want to talk a little more about communication? Talk about and tell us a little bit about your venture because I know you're working on something, and see how uh, they can actually contact you.
Yeah, so if you like to contact me, feel free to connect with me. I'm more so active on Facebook. My LinkedIn is, as you know, we're working on that. And you can also connect with me on Instagram as well at Tony Mizell. You can definitely connect with me on any one of those platforms, and I'll be glad to speak with you as well. And it's been an honor for sure.
All right, so we'll make sure that folks that are with us to put that in the comment section of the post. If you'll see it on the replay. So if you want to get a hold of Tony, we'll make sure that all his information is on there. For those of you that have stuck with us all this time, thank you for being with us tonight. We talked about leadership communication, just in a broad sense, right? We covered a lot of things, but make sure that your message is clear. Make sure that your message is timely. Make sure that your message is going to the right people. Make sure that you are aware when you're delivering this message, right? And just be real. Be real, but always apply love because it doesn't matter if you're communicating. Hey, look, you messed up. You got to bring everybody back to safe to safe ground, and that's what a true leader does. He's able to do all those things, but rescue the person that's in jeopardy at any given time. So, Tony, thank you so much for being with me tonight. Everybody, I wish you a very good long weekend. Hey, if you're in the U.S., you get a 3-day weekend coming up. So a perfect way to start Aloha Friday. Everybody, all my ohana on Oahu, I love ya. Thank you for all that you do, and we will see each other next week, uh, and answer some more leadership questions as we go on. So thank you, everybody. Aloha. Have a great weekend.